Hi people, it's me, Anja. My pronouns are she and her, and welcome back to my channel for a new video. So instead of filming my mid-year book tag, I decided to make a video talking about my most disappointing books that I've read so far this year, because that suited my mood way more. Because if I were to make a video talking about my mid-year book tag, I would have to talk about my reading year so far, which kind of has been going not as great as I was really expecting it to be at this point. So yeah, here we are instead. And also, with that said, some of these books I will be spoiling because it's just easier for me to talk about why I didn't like them with spoiling them. Anyway, so with that said, the first book on this list is called I Hope This Doesn't Find You. This story is a YA contemporary which follows a young East Asian main character where basically her hate mail gets sent out accidentally. And it's marketed as like To All the Boys meets Never Have I Ever or something like that. And honestly, like, this book was one of my most anticipated releases of the entire year, but it ended up quickly becoming one of my most disappointing books of the entire year due to the fact that it felt so underdeveloped and so underwhelming. Like, everything is so underdeveloped, from the romance to the friendships to the characters to even the plot. Like, I was just so angry because I was so disappointed. And I felt like the fact that, like, her best friend sent out her hate mail, like, that whole thing was not very resolved. It was kind of swept under the rug. I just didn't like it. And the romance made no sense to me. And yeah, I didn't like this book very much. So there's that. The next book on this list is called The Last Love Song. For those who don't know, this book is a YA contemporary retelling of Mamma Mia, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't like this book very much because, first of all, the main romance felt very conditional, and it truly didn't feel like they had true emotional feelings for each other. Second of all, the character of Mia's mom felt very underdeveloped, and I just didn't understand why you didn't think to, like, Google your mom if she's supposed to be some sort of local celebrity. Like, how come you don't know how she died? What? Like, I understand kind of your grandparents not telling you maybe, but, like, you can't Google her? You can't look her up on the internet? I don't understand. That part felt very unbelievable to me, and, like, also, this story felt underdeveloped as well. I think that that's my main pet peeve when it comes to books. How come it's so underdeveloped? I felt like everybody who loved this book knew the author personally, and it made them so biased. Because I personally don't know the author at all, and, like, I didn't like this book. So yeah, there's that. The next book on this list is called To a Darker Shore. This story is a YA fantasy following two autistic main characters, and one of them has to save her best friend after something happens to him or something like that. I don't know, but I don't care. I didn't like this book very much. Again, it was so highly anticipated for me based on the author's reputation of their previous book, but this book just wasn't very good. There was so much waffling around in the middle for some reason, and I didn't understand why there was such a huge time jump before, like, their reunion, you know what I mean? Also, like, I don't think this book deserved to have dual perspective. I think it should have only been in her perspective and not also in his perspective. But maybe it's because he just felt so underdeveloped as a character, just in general. So, yeah. I don't love the romance very much, but I enjoy the disability representation. I always love autism representation in YA fantasy, especially as an autistic main character myself. But, like, overall, I just didn't like this book very much. Like, their debut is so much better, and this book just isn't very good. So anyway, with that said, there you have it. The next book on this list is called In the Shallows. This story is a YA contemporary following a main character who's trying to unravel a mystery tied to the sea or something like that. And I didn't like this book because, first of all, the Goodreads synopsis is so misleading. Why does it say 18 months later when it's not 18 months later? And it's literally like less than a month later or something like that. Second of all, I don't really think that it was really worth it to have Nico and Mara have a relationship prior to Nico's accident. Because, like, the ways in which Nico treated Mara before was so toxic. and like Mullah didn't deserve that at all, and I just didn't enjoy the second chance romance with a toxic relationship, because I just feel like, I don't know, the ways in which the romance started again, I just wasn't on board for it, really. Third of all, I just felt like the mental health was really villainized and didn't need to be. Like, it's giving everything, and not in a good way, because I didn't like that book at all. So anyway, with that said, the writing was pretty. I enjoyed like the side characters and stuff, but like overall, I didn't really like this book at all, and it kind of rubbed me the wrong way towards the end. So anyway, with that said, I don't recommend this book. No thank you. The next book on this list is called Sleep Like Death. This story is a YA fantasy retelling of Snow White, or at least it's supposed to be, and I didn't like this book at all, because first of all, the pacing wasn't that great. Like, the romance had little to no chemistry. I thought the queer representation would be a little bit more present. I was expecting the main character, Eve, to be in a sapphic relationship herself, and she wasn't. But, like, it's not that that was really the problem. Like, I didn't really mind that her love interest happened to be a man, but, like, the romance between them had such, like, little chemistry, so that was weird. Speaking of the queer representation that was there, why was one of her moms an animal for the majority of the book? What the heck was that? Didn't really love that as much. Speaking of the world building, though, like, some of it made no sense. For example, Eve's magical abilities seemed to contradict each other sometimes, and I just didn't really like it that much, and the villain conflict resolution towards the end also made no sense. So, I don't know. This book was giving Cinderella is Dead, and not in a good way, because I personally was so disappointed by that book when it came out 4 years ago, and like, this book just wasn't very good. And maybe the author is just better at writing urban fantasies than she is at writing like high fantasies. So anyway, with that said, I didn't like this book at all, and I don't recommend it. The next book on this list is called Exes and Foes. This story is a YA contemporary following two ex-best friends who are competing for the same girl, only to accidentally fall in love with each other instead. I didn't like this book very much because, first of all, I didn't like how the Alo Ace character was just a plot device for the two main characters to get together, because it meant that Juliet was a very underdeveloped character, as were the other side characters. Like, Emma and Caleb's friends felt very underdeveloped to me. I don't even remember their names. Maybe one of them is named Alice. I don't really know. But anyway, speaking of the main characters themselves, I wish that their backstories were like developed and revealed like a little earlier. And like, this story felt like too long and too short at the same time, which is a weird dichotomy. But like, I do like how the backstories were handled with grace and like respect, and they weren't given like a neat happy ending, because that's way more realistic. But like, overall, I didn't like this book very much. And I also don't ship Emma and Caleb together. You know, that's another thing. So anyway, overall, I don't really like this book that much. And what makes it even more disappointing is that I know that the author can do so much better. Their debut was so good, and this book was so not. The idea of like competition and competing over Juliet felt just kind of shitty to me overall, and even though the plot like acknowledges that, they still went through with it. So anyway, with that said, take that as you will. The last book on this list is called Death at Morning House. I just talked about this book in my last video, so basically now what I'm going to do is just add on to what I said before, this time with spoilers. So basically the story follows a young sapphic main character who accepts a new job on an island with a dark, murky history. And basically, I didn't like this book very much because, first of all, the bisexual representation, in my opinion, felt stereotypical, but like in a bad way. And I kind of feel like it rubbed me the wrong way, because mostly, like, he's the only bisexual character in the entire cast. Like, there were some other, like, queer side characters, as well as the main character being sapphic, but, like, he's the only bi one. So it felt kind of weird that, like, the bisexual cheating stereotype was perpetrated through him. And don't get me wrong, I understand that he's supposed to be a character that, like, everyone thinks is so great, but he isn't. but like I just didn't like that very much. And also, like, the mystery doesn't really start until halfway through in the present timeline, and the connection between the present timeline and the past timeline is only the house. Like, it's not anything else. And I feel like it should have been. Like, the connection between the two of them should have been more, like, concrete and more, like, interesting. And it just wasn't. And also, like, the whole storyline in the past being connected to eugenics isn't talked about in the present ever, and it really should have been, in my opinion. So yeah, with that said, I didn't like this book very much, so there you have it. So in conclusion, opinions are subjective. So if you loved these books, I love that for you, but I didn't personally. Second of all, I know that historically, I don't typically make a video talking about my least favorite books of the year until the end of that year or the beginning of the following year, but I decided to just do it right now. So anyway, in conclusion, if you enjoy this video, please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the sunflower emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!